Hi, welcome to the Neurology Nook. I'm Kelly Gill, PA, and this is Dr. Sumul Modi. We're the team at Celeste Brain Health where we treat a variety of neurologic conditions with an emphasis on healing the brain and preventing disease. We're here to share with you actionable tips on how to optimize the health of your brain. Let's dive in. Today, our topic is the neuroprotective power of exercise. Exercise helps our brains thrive in every way, improving our immune response, mitigating inflammation, boosting cognitive performance, and protecting the vasculature in our brains. And of course, the benefits it has on improving our mental health, our sleep, and our metabolic health cannot be overstated. Let's talk about exactly what's happening in our bodies when we exercise.
Yeah, good topic, Kelly. I
Yeah,
think
thank you.
I think this was your choice, right, to talk about this. I can totally see that passion in you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love empowering people to exercise because it's one of the biggest things that we can do to protect our brain, more than many drugs like that may help you with your anxiety. And more than a lot of other lifestyle changes, exercise can give us an incredible cognitive boost.
Yes, absolutely. And I think today we are going to discuss about molecular basis of how exercise helps, what kind of exercises to perform, what kind of evidence out there, and what kind of diseases the exercises help with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we can definitely cover all those topics.
So, Kelly, tell us what happens in our brain at the molecular level, at the microscopic level. I mean, what kind of chemical reactions occur, and how does it affect the brain health in general?
Sure. So to sort of start higher level and zoom out a little bit, when we're exercising, the biggest thing that's happening is we're increasing the blood flow to the brain. So at its simplest level, more blood flow means more nutrients to the brain. So that is the number one thing that it helps. In bringing more blood flow to the brain, increasing our heart rates, we're also improving the vasculature at the level of the brain as well. So getting healthy, higher heart rates and blood pressure going through the brain as you exercise, again, for that short time, improves the vasculature in that it improves the compliance of your blood vessels so they're better able to respond to changes in heart rate and blood pressure over time. So that I would say would be the first benefit.
And I've heard a lot about this molecule BDNF,
Yes.
brain-derived neurotropic factor.
Yes.
Yeah, can you tell a little bit more about that to our audience?
Yes, I love the power of BDNF. Some
Yeah.
people call it miracle grow of the brain. And I think that's an excellent way to describe it and to remember it. So, really, what happens when we exercise, anytime we do a muscle contraction, we are telling our muscles to release these things called myokines, which are like signaling proteins. And they go into your brain and all over your body. They tell your body to do different functions, but it's really all positive. So, part of what it does is it mitigates your immune system. It improves it, it boosts it, and it also manages the inflammatory response in the body. I'm sure you've heard all the talk about
Yeah,
inflammation
absolutely.
going on
And
lately.
it reduces the inflammation at
Yes.
microscopic level.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah, what about neuroplasticity? Does it stimulate nerve growth in the brain, developing new connections in the brain?
Absolutely. So, part of what those myokines do when they go to the brain is they increase the amount of BDNF. BDNF's role is to improve synaptic connections in the brain. So, that's, as you know, where the neurons talk to each
Yeah,
other
absolutely.
and increase the growth of those neurons as well. There's also been studies that people that have higher levels of BDNF have lower levels of mood disorders than people who have low levels of BDNF. So I think that's
Yeah.
super important to
I think I've read
remember.
that study, and there is also a study about neurodegenerative diseases,
Hmm.
Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, and how BDNF slows down the neurodegenerative processes. Is
Oh,
that right?
absolutely. Yes, I would say that that would be correct. So I would encourage everyone to get out there, exercise, build as many synaptic connections in your brain as you can. And as you age, you have more of a buffer in your brain
Like more
as
of a
things go
reserve
on.
capacity.
Yes, yeah, you have some resilience there.
Okay, so do you know of any specific areas of the brain that undergoes more plasticity with BDNF?
Sure. So, one study that I know shows that BDNF actually increases the number of neurons in the hippocampus, which can increase learning and memory. So, any of you college students out there trying to give yourself a bit of a cognitive boost here, exercise can help you get what you're looking for in that way and can help boost your performance in school.
Okay, so Kelly, you just talked about anti-inflammatory properties of exercises in the brain. And we also know that aerobic exercise reduce the levels of free radicals in the brain, and that has effect on slowing down the aging process. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so exercise actually helps your liver to produce more glutathione, and glutathione is kind of known as the master antioxidant of the body. So every day when you're going about your daily life, we all produce what's called reactive oxygen species, and it's like a metabolic waste byproduct, basically. It's a byproduct of all the things that your body has to do during the day to keep it moving. And glutathione mops it up.
And these free radicals or reactive oxygen species, they can react with a lot of different molecules inside the cell and can change the properties of those molecules.
Yes. Yeah, it can actually induce changes in your DNA and cause some DNA damage. So we really need that glutathione every day to come in and mop up this metabolic waste to help to repair our DNA, which we can talk about sleep in a minute and its effect on brain health, but sleeping also helps with that DNA repair at the end of the day. And essentially anything we can do to get these free radicals out of there, neutralize them, and repair at the end of the day is going to be crucial to our health and longevity.
So as you talked about reactive oxygen species and causing all this damage and that needs to be cleaned up, we also know that diabetes also causes some changes at molecular level. And so how does the exercise fit into this?
Sure. So the problem with diabetes is that you have elevated blood glucose for longer than what your body should tolerate. What the problem with that is the longer that glucose is floating around in your vasculature, the more problems it can cause. What it likes to do is attach to proteins and damage them through this process of glycation. It's really just when the sugar attaches to a protein.
And isn't that how we measure the blood glucose levels?
Yes, that's the hemoglobin A1C. It's how that glycation happens with hemoglobin. So sugar to hemoglobin. So it can measure that.
Yeah. So the audience who is listening, glycated hemoglobin is a blood test that can measure how your average blood glucose had been in the previous 3 months.
Yes. So what exercise does is it's a huge benefit to your metabolic health as it acts as a sink for glucose uptake. So the more that you use your muscles, the more that your muscles can absorb this sugar independent of insulin. Now, for anyone who's listening that's not that familiar with insulin, insulin is released by your pancreas if your pancreas senses that your blood glucose is elevated. So the insulin is released and then facilitates the sugar from your blood to get into your cells. Now, that whole mechanism doesn't need to happen if you're in the midst of exercise. If you're using your muscles in your strength training, you can get sugar into your muscles to be used, processed, get rid of, or stored independent of that whole process. What this means is it decreases your risk of getting diabetes. So this is a very important thing, especially as we're dealing with the obesity epidemic in the United States and elsewhere. The power of muscle-centric training, the power of increasing your muscle mass to use that sugar cannot be overstated.
Yeah, good knowledge. So in general, exercise reduces your insulin resistance and helps preventing and controlling diabetes. Let's talk about the mood disorders, depression, labile emotions, and anxiety, and how exercise can benefit in that.
Sure, let's get into it. So exercise and mental health, I think it's one of the biggest things that we can do to protect our mental health. In a world where a lot of us are attached to screens, just for fun, for scrolling purposes, but also because of our jobs. You know, we were not evolved to be people who sit all day and be sedentary. We were out hunting and
Totally
gathering.
agree with that. Yep.
Yes, we're meant to be up and moving. This is what our bodies and our joints and our muscles and our brains were evolved for. So especially now more than ever, making the decision to get up and move your body is going to be
especially
really
outdoors.
important. Yes, especially outdoors. The benefits of exercising outdoors can't be overstated either. There are several studies looking at exercise compared to no exercise, and then exercise inside compared to exercise outside. And there's a clear benefit from a mental health standpoint of exercising outside. Now, we don't know exactly why, but my guess is that this is another part of just, again,
It's just more natural.
yes.
That's how we are evolved.
Exactly. It's the same thing you feel like when you go out to the lake for a day and you feel the wind in your hair and the sun in your face and you forget about work or whatever struggles you have and you feel at peace. There's something about us that wants to be in nature. So I would say the best kind of exercise is probably done outside for that reason. Another great study that I looked at shows that really any type of consistent exercise that you can do is better than SSRIs, which if you're not familiar with those, they're the most commonly prescribed drug for anxiety and depression. Exercise is better than these medications at boosting.
And what do these medications do? So the SSRI, for the audience who doesn't know, SSRI stands for selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And it raises the levels of serotonin in the brain, which is linked to elevated mood. So how does exercise replace effects of serotonin?
Sure. So exercise can independently increase the neurotransmitters in your brain that give you those positive feelings. Some people just sort of offhandedly call them just endorphins.
Yeah. Any other neurotransmitters apart from serotonin?
Yeah, dopamine is another one that we can get from that.
It's called the happiness chemical.
It is. Dopamine is also heavily involved in motivation. So that's another thing that we can talk about, the link between dopamine and exercise. It gives you what some people call a little high, like a runner's high. If you really love to get out there and really run fast for a long time, a lot of runners say that they will get that feeling. And people say that that's where the dopamine actually comes in that way. It motivates you also to come back to running.
Also, another neurotransmitter that motivates you would be norepinephrine.
Tell us more about that.
So in order to perform exercises, you need sympathetic support, means you have to have elevated heart rate, your blood pressure has to go up.
Sure.
This kind of changes happen in the heart, in the cardiovascular system, and also in the brain. So it puts you in that fight response, and that again motivates you. It raises your energy levels.
Sure. I think another thing that's also understated is once you start exercising consistently, even if it's small amounts of time, you start to show yourself, prove to yourself that you can be strong. And that in and of itself becomes a motivator to come back to exercise and to prove to yourself that you can do something hard. We need to be reminded that we are meant to do hard things.
And that brings us to a good point about exercises and its association with higher level of confidence and sense of well-being. These things are all linked.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
that self-esteem and confidence is also linked to positive brain health.
Absolutely. Showing up for yourself in that way to not just improve your physical health, but your mental health, and to show yourself that you can be strong, to show yourself that you can be consistent, really is a mental health boost. All the things.
So what do you think about sleep? Does exercise help with sleep, and how?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest ways that exercise helps with sleep is it just makes you physically tired.
Absolutely.
And we talked about earlier how, a lot of us are sitting at desk jobs, so it's not how it used to be where we're having to be super active during the day. So if we add in exercise as an element of that, being physically tired definitely can help by the end of the day. The key with that, I think, is just try not to exercise too close to bedtime because, again, that kind of burst of energy that you get
Dopamine
and hormones.
and norepinephrine.
Yes, exactly. And neurotransmitters can last long after you finish your exercise, which is a great thing, except for if it interferes with your sleep. So trying to avoid exercise depends upon the person. For me in particular, I feel like I can't exercise within 4 hours of bedtime, or I will absolutely be up and pumped and looking for something to do.
So another thing that comes with the exercise and better quality sleep is that when you spend more time in REM sleep, and that's when the memories are consolidated in the brain, all the experiences you had during the day are processed in REM sleep at night, and those important memories are consolidated for the longer term. So in that sense, it improves the memory.
That is so important to me and so motivating for me to get good quality sleep. So, Dr. Modi, what do you know about the relationship between exercise and diseases like ADHD?
Yeah, so exercise, as we talked about, raises the levels of certain neurotransmitters, especially norepinephrine, and that just increases your focus, concentration, execution, and attention span. And all of that helps with patients with ADHD. There's medications like Adderall, Ritalin, they all do the same thing. They raise the level of norepinephrine and dopamine in the brain, and exercise does the same thing.
Isn't that so interesting? Exercise does the same thing as maybe an ADHD medicine would, but with none of the side effects. And we can see the same with drugs like we talked about earlier with SSRI for anxiety and depression. It just seems like it should be more discussed as a first line option for mental health and even neurodivergence.
Yes, I agree with that. So, Kelly, since you know a lot about the kinds of exercises and how each kind of exercise affects the brain health, can you tell our audience a little bit more about the types of exercises that specifically targets the brain health?
Sure. So first we can talk about aerobic exercise. So sort of the common slang for aerobic exercise is cardio. So it's things like running, swimming, but even biking at fast speeds can be considered cardiovascular exercise. It really gets your heart rate up, which is the main benefit of this. And as we talked about earlier, things that get your heart rate up improves the blood flow to your brain. So this is the main mechanism in which aerobic exercise is helpful to brain health. Just more blood flow, meaning more nutrition in that area. But
On aerobic exercises help keep the blood vessels healthy. So the lumen of the blood vessels, the large blood vessels, like carotid artery that goes through the brain, and also tiny little arteries in the brain, the capillaries. Aerobic exercise tends to keep these vessels younger, and so less chances of cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases, less chances of strokes, brain hemorrhage, etc.
that's great information to know as well. And then I guess the second thing we should talk about would be as it pertains to strength training. We really hit on this earlier, right? Everything that the muscle does when we're exercising is sending out those myokine signals, increasing the BDNF or the miracle grow of the brain, creating new synapses, and its impact, especially on your metabolic health and on the number of mitochondria that you actually have in your brain and your body and your muscles. Gotta love strength training. Honestly, I think there's nothing better for your body, your brain, your health, your heart as you age. Everybody pick up something heavy.
So Kelly, as we all know, some people prefer to go to gym for the exercises, and some people like to do it solo, whether indoor or outdoor. What do you think about that? Is group exercise better because of more social engagement? Or is solo exercise better because maybe you can concentrate more on your exercise and be less distracted by other things?
Sure. I mean, my answer for that would be whatever you can do consistently. Whatever you like to do for your exercise is something that you should do. Of course, there's some improvements in your social health and well-being, establishing and connecting with people through relationships. And some people love to do that through physical fitness. But if you're getting that in other arenas of your life and you don't like to exercise with other people, you like to do it solo, awesome, do it. Whatever you can do consistently is the thing that's going to help you win with your exercise and its benefits on your body in the long term. So if that means 15 minutes a day of doing a small strength training exercise in your home office that's also your guest room, fine. If you need to go to a big fancy gym and do a class, fine. I mean, sometimes, especially as a working mom, I just feel very overstimulated by all the people and the things that need me in life.
Yeah, sometimes you need a break, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think for many years I tried to force myself to go to a gym or group fitness class because that's what everyone said that you could do. But I found the most success doing strength training workouts at home by myself.
Yeah, so Kelly, people have been using things like smartwatches and fitness trackers nowadays. And once they start using it, they develop this feedback mechanism where they are motivated by their targets, like how many steps they did, how
Sure.
many rings they completed.
Yes.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Do you follow those kind of things in your smartwatch?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love it. I have both an Apple Watch and an Ultra Human Ring, and both of them track steps, sleep, activity. So I really enjoy that. But I'm just someone that enjoys data. Now, I will say that there are some pros and cons to this. I know some people who feel like if they forgot to wear their Apple Watch while they're exercising, they will go back and do the exercise again because the watch didn't record it. I do not suggest that level of, I think you need to remember in your brain, like, hey, whether or not this exercise was recorded, whether or not someone saw me do it, I did it and I showed up for myself today. So as long as we're keeping good sort of mental health boundaries around this data, I think that it can be a really helpful thing to not obsess with, but also to just help you reach goals and track targets.
And do you compare yourself? Do you set challenges based on how others are doing on these apps?
That's a great question. I actually haven't done that before. I don't know. I just have no interest, no interest in competing with anyone but myself. I don't know if that's healthy or unhealthy. I'm sure that there's pros and cons to that. I think it depends on who you feel like you are in that regard. Are you more externally motivated? Do you like that kind of competition? There's a good example is my husband. Like if he's involved in some kind of boys challenge, he will totally show up for that and kill it. But if he doesn't have that kind of accountability, it kind of slips his mind, where I'm a little bit the opposite. I don't want to compete with anyone else in the exercise world except for myself. So I think it's another thing where you have to suss out who you are, how you're motivated, and be honest with yourself about how you show up in the world in that way, and then use that as a motivator to get out of exercise what you need. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with me to talk about my very favorite topic, exercise. Thank you so much, Dr. Modi.
Thank you for sharing all your knowledge and all the information and all the tips, and I hope audience found it useful.
Yes, I hope so too. So start somewhere, build up from there, and see a boost in your brain health and your mental health in every way.
Yeah, and that ends this episode of our podcast series, and see you next time.